Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this program. Thank you, Dr. Swamy, for accepting our invitation once again. As someone said that Money Life seems to have an annual lecture by Dr. Swamy. I said we would love to have many more because the demand is so much higher, but I don't think we can impose on his time more than once a year. So we are really delighted to welcome Dr. Swamy for the third time. I think this topic couldn't have had a better speaker than Dr. Swamy because, as we all know, we need a free and frank discussion. And is there any political leader who's absolutely open, free, honest, and frank as Dr. Swamy? What do you think? There is very little discussion on the bill in the media. Lots of people believe that it's going to be passed because nobody in Parliament wants to appear opposed to black money. Or they're all in favor of black money, but they pretend that they want to bring it back. I believe everybody in this room wants to back the government on any measure that will curb the menace of black money. We want the government to bring our wealth that is stashed away in Swiss banks back into the country, and we want to stop paying bribes for legitimate services that the government is supposed to provide us. So I think there's a lot of support in this room as well for the black money bill. Before I invite Dr. Swamy to speak, we're going to have a formal introduction by Devashish Basu. I'm sure all of you say Dr. Swamy does not need an introduction. I agree, but I think you still should hear the formal introduction. Devashish, over to you.
Those of you who have attended the previous meetings of Dr. Swamy already would have heard some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. Those who haven't would be entertained by quite a few things that he has done in his long career, which is extremely interesting and gripping. Dr. Swamy is an economist and a politician, which is a very rare combination, as you know. But unlike most politicians who have forgotten why they are in public life or who have never been interested in public interest, he's a politician who spent his time fighting for us. At any time, he's fighting 4 to 5 high-profile cases in High Court and Supreme Court. In fact, I just heard that the number is almost 12. He's fighting 12 such cases right now, which must be something of a record. Dr. Swamy studied mathematics at the Delhi University, followed by a master's degree from the Indian Statistical Institute in Calcutta. He then did his PhD in economics from Harvard University in 1965 under Simon Kuznets, a Nobel laureate. He taught at the Harvard until 1969, when, funnily, Dr. Amartya Sen sought him for a position in the Delhi School of Economics. They're both ideologically, economically at the poles apart. He accepted the offer, but when he arrived, he found his appointment cancelled because of his strong views that India must have nuclear capabilities. Remember, this was in the 60s. And his pro-market policies, and also challenging Indira Gandhi's Soviet-influenced socialist centralized planning. In 1970, during the Parliament debate on the budget, Prime Minister Mrs. Indira Gandhi mentioned Dr. Swamy by name and dismissed all his ideas at that time as a Santa Claus with unrealistic ideas. By the mid-1970s, decades of oppressive and backward economic policies that India followed since independence was beginning to take its toll, and winds of change were blowing. Dr. Swamy became very politically involved, very actively on the ground. He joined Jayaprakash Narayan's Sarvodaya movement and entered the Rajya Sabha in 1974. He held important positions thereafter as a minister and in Planning Commission member under the Janata government, and once again much later in 1991 in the Chandrasekhar government. In one of the most intriguing episodes of Indian politics, and this is a story that you would have heard if you had come in the earlier sessions, but it's worth repeating. In 1994, he was appointed as the chairman of the Commission on Labour Standards and International Trade by Narasimha Rao. Now, this was a cabinet rank position which Dr. Swamy held as an opposition party member in a Congress government, and was often being invited to cabinet meetings. It was for the first time something like this has happened in India, and possibly the last time. But the more interesting part of this episode was that the commission was placed under Commerce Ministry. And guess who was the Minister of State of Commerce reporting to Dr. Swamy at that time? A central gentleman called Mr. P. Chidambaram. Dr. Swamy has publicly challenged and fought prime ministers, chief ministers, top politicians, and high officials by filing cases of corruption and frauds in court of law. Many try to argue that he makes wild allegations. But we ask others, and we encourage you to ask yourself, why is it that no one so far in the government, in the party, in public life, anywhere has yet found anything to charge him with? Any offense. Forget about filing any case of law anywhere. They know in their heart of hearts, and you should know, all those wild allegations are always based on facts. We may not agree with those facts. Those facts may look really startling, but he knows what he's talking about. Friends, please welcome me in joining Dr. Subramanian Swamy, a rare politician who fights for us.
Sucheta Dalal, Mr. Basu, Jagdish Shetty, and this very distinguished audience of the city of Mumbai. I intend to speak in 3 parts. First, I will describe what I think is the so-called bill named as Undisclosed Foreign Income and Assets Imposition of Tax Bill 2015. The second thing is I'll speak about whether this bill will bring back black money abroad and end the black money menace within the country. And if not, what is the way to do it? And finally, I will speak about why black money is a cancerous development in our economy. As far as the bill is concerned, I will have a very good opportunity to argue it in detail, threadbare in the Supreme Court. Day before yesterday, I was in the Supreme Court when the black money petition by Mr. Jethmalani and about 12 others, and argued by Anil Diwan, came up for hearing. I had made an application that I should also be impleaded because I know something about the subject. And I was surprised that the Supreme Court immediately accepted me as a party and has provided and has asked me to lead arguments on the 12th of May. It was really the Supreme Court which set the ball rolling in 2011 with a judgment where they directed the government to set up an SIT. The previous government of Congress declined to set it up. In fact, they tried to go in revision petitions and other things to try and see if the Supreme Court would reverse its stand. But the Supreme Court held firm. And as soon as the new BJP government came, they did set up the SIT as required, as directed by the Supreme Court. But whether that SIT has produced the necessary results or not, we'll know when the discussion in the Supreme Court starts on the 12th of May. As of now, we don't have a good record of having identified where the black money is and how it can be brought back. So this bill essentially does contain very harsh measures, as Sucheta has just now said, but it is predicated on the assumption that these measures can go into effect only when the detection of undisclosed foreign incomes and assets takes place, or there is a voluntary disclosure of the foreign money that you have kept abroad illegally. That is, this bill has nothing to do with how to bring back the money from abroad. It's a very substantial amount. According to my estimate, it is 120 lakh crore rupees. Considering that the annual revenue from income tax, personal income tax, is only 2 lakh crores, that's 60 years of the income tax revenue is in foreign countries. There are about 70 countries in the world where they have secret banking, and in these 70 countries, Indians have accounts in practically all the countries, and the total amount is 120 lakh crores. That would be almost $2 trillion. And that's a huge amount, because our GDP itself is only about a little more than $1 trillion. So, where is the measures in this bill for bringing all this back? None whatsoever. It is essentially, therefore, an income tax type bill with very harsh measures in case you are detected having money abroad and not declared it, or you voluntarily declare it. As far as the voluntary declaring part is concerned, and the concessions given on the taxes to be imposed, that is in fact de facto an amnesty scheme. So, since in 1997, the then finance minister, Mr. Chidambaram, faced with the possibility that his amnesty scheme might be cancelled, and he had good cause to worry, because through his daughter-in-law, 600 crores were brought into India in the amnesty scheme. And if the amnesty scheme had been cancelled, he would be in trouble. He anyway will be in trouble, because public servants cannot avail of the amnesty scheme. So one of these days, when I find time, I will rake up that case and file it. So the court challenge is bound to take place. And so this part, the amnesty part, will, in my opinion, be struck down. So what will be left is what is detected by the government of India. And on that basis, very harsh measures are there. 10 years imprisonment, several times the tax due as penalty, and so on. These are all there in it. But the key word is having detected. And that's missing in this bill, because it's designed not for that purpose. So therefore, what we have today, what we call, as some people are objecting to it as being draconian, is only the income tax operations, the empowerment of tax officials, their ability to raid at will and to impose their own assumptions about how much you actually have been stashing away. So this bill, therefore, is, in my opinion, incomplete as far as our electoral promise is concerned, which is to bring the black money back. This bill is meant for, when you bring the black money back, how it is to be treated from the tax angle. Now, the most important part is that we have two aspects of black money. One is bringing it back, and two is preventing new generation of black money. These must essentially form a part of the black money bill, and it should become as a package. What are the changes you will bring about in the system by which no new generation of black money is, there's an incentive to do so. And at the same time, how to bring back what is already there. On this, there has been insufficient debate in the country. And I think I would go, therefore, to the second part of my lecture, and that is, how do we bring back black money so that this bill can be applied and the government can penalize the people who have to be penalized? And how to eliminate the generation of black money? There are, in my opinion, 4 known ways which has been, those ways have been gone through, has been traversed by several countries of bringing black money back. The one that we hear most from our finance ministry is something called DTAA. Double Taxation Avoidance Act. Now, Double Taxation Avoidance Act essentially means that you are legally earning money abroad. For instance, I'm employed in a German bank in Bonn, and I earn the money. I'm a citizen of India. I tell the Germans that I will pay the taxes in India on world income, and tell the Indians that I'm paying taxes in Germany. So you escape paying taxes. There is a provision by agreement of exchanging information. So that's a very small part of the black money. And much of the focus of the finance ministry in the last 1 year has been on this aspect. And of course, the previous government did nothing else but talk about DTAA and how to modify it in such a way that none of them get caught. For instance, one of the amendments was that only future violations of the in the future, if you are doing this, then only it will come under DTAA. So this is one, but it's a very limited method. The second one is the one that is employed recently by France and Germany. Germany found that its officials were having accounts in Liechtenstein, a neighboring country, which is also a tax haven. It's a secret banking country. And therefore decided to make a request from government to government that we know that there are German nationals who have accounts in Liechtenstein Bank, so please give us the names. The Liechtenstein king informed the German chancellor that cannot be done because our whole business depends on secrecy, and hence we are not going to give these amounts. So what did Germany do? It identified the senior-most officer of the bank, brought him to a safe location, and offered him $500 million plus plastic surgery plus a US passport, and said, if you can give us the German names, this is all yours. They had the passport ready, they had the visas ready, the American passport plus the German visas in it to make it legitimate that he was here. And they also said that you name the bank and we'll deposit $500 million. This officer accepted. And having accepted, he said, I will be not able to give you only Germans because sorting out will take a lot of time. So I will put the entire record on CD and give it to you. So they put it, this officer put it on a CD and gave it to the Germans, who then downloaded it and found that there were 23 countries, nationals of 23 countries who had secret bank account in Liechtenstein. And so they sorted it out by countries and wrote to each of these countries that in the course of our investigation we have come across your nationals having a secret account in Liechtenstein Bank. Would you like to have the list of names? Out of the 20, there were 23 countries, one was Germany, so out of the 22 countries, 21 countries immediately wrote back saying, yes, please send the CD to us. But one country did not. It was a little bit shy. And that was our country. And therefore, this matter was taken to the Supreme Court. And finally, the Supreme Court gave a direction that get those names. And so the CD arrived. They have downloaded it, prepared the list. As yet, it has not been given to the general public. The only difference between the previous government and our government is our government put it in a sealed envelope and gave it to the Supreme Court. So that's one way. And the French did exactly the same thing. They found that their nationals had a lot of bank accounts in Hong Kong Shanghai Bank branch in Geneva. So they contacted the owners of the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank and said, we learned that you have a large number of our nationals having accounts, please give it to us. Same reply, secrecy, we can't do it. And therefore, what did the French do? They did the same thing as the Germans. They identified the senior-most officer, but that officer was satisfied with $200 million, not $500 million, because he was Italian nationality. So he gave the names. And in that 800 plus names were of Indians. And that name also under the Supreme Court direction, names are right. So only 2 banks we have names today. The government of India does not have names of people holding Indians holding accounts abroad illegally for any but these 2 banks. And therefore, this is a procedure you can adopt. You can't adopt for every bank. There are 70 countries and may be very difficult. So then there is a third way, which is the American way, which I like very much. Maybe because I've spent so many years in America. It's very direct and straightforward. The Americans discovered that there were 5,671 names of Americans having bank accounts undisclosed in Credit Suisse and Union Bank of Switzerland. So both Credit Suisse and Union Bank of Switzerland has branches in Washington. So the Treasury Department called the senior officials and said, please give us the names. So these bank officials said, we can't do that, it's, we'll lose our job, it's secrecy, etc. So what did the Americans do? That evening they arrested all the top officers of these both banks under Espionage Act, that they were engaging in espionage, and put them along with other criminals in the Washington jail. Within 3 days, the Swiss authorities told the Americans, we'll give you 5,761 names, and the Americans got those names. So that is another method that can be employed. And certainly in Bombay, you got a branch of Credit Suisse, and you have also got a branch of Union Bank of Switzerland. And I think this is one method that can be employed because it is a crime against our nation. The fourth method, which is most clinical method, and was first propounded by Fali Nariman, and subsequently to the Supreme Court we have given a draft of how it can be done, and that is based on the 2005 resolution of the UN General Assembly on corruption. A section was adopted in that resolution stating that if any country identifies a secret banking country and says and has an ordinance or an act passed by its own parliament saying that all Indian citizens having accounts in these 70 countries are hereby nationalized, and the money of that should be handed over to the government of India, because it is loot from India and therefore it has to be handed. This method was adopted by Egypt for Mubarak and the Libyans for Gaddafi. And they brought a law saying that this. So earlier on, the Philippines also did it with Marcos. So we can do it. A general pass an ordinance, adopt an ordinance. You're doing anyway lots of ordinances. One more ordinance, no problem. Have an ordinance. I don't think anybody in the parliament will oppose that because they're too scared. And then go from country to country and say, please give us this. And the United Nations will support you on this, and it can be enforced. So this is the fourth method. And in my opinion, besides the American method, this is the preferred method. By this, you would be able to, within 2 to 3 years, get all the black money, and the black money will start coming very quickly. I was surprised to find from my own personal contacts that the Enforcement Directorate has a vast amount of intelligence on who is having accounts abroad and not declaring. I found 2 names once. They were my favorite names. I found that there's a bank called Saracen Bank in Zurich and another bank called Pictet Bank, Pictet Bank in Switzerland. And both of them had bank accounts of Ms. Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi. And I wrote to the SIT saying that I have information that these people are maintaining secret bank accounts in these 2 banks, and according to me, there is information, not evidence, information with the Enforcement Directorate. But the SIT has so far not acted on it, and I'm going to present it in the Supreme Court on the 12th and see what the reaction is. You see, of course, Ms. Sonia Gandhi has other accounts too, but one of them is very tough to get, and that is Macau. I could have got it if I had accepted the Prime Minister's offer to be the president of the BRICS Bank. Would have been located in Shanghai, and I could have used that influence. But I didn't want to leave India, so I told him, I'm sorry, I won't accept the offer, I'll stay in India. Maybe he thought if I go away abroad, I will be less trouble. I don't know. But the fact is that China is probably the toughest. But in my opinion, in Vatican Bank, for example, there's an account. These are easy to get. Why they are not able to do it? Or accept my offer, give me 2 months and the power, put the Enforcement Directorate under me, and RAW and IB to assist me. I'll get you all the black money that is abroad back. But then we don't know who all the other names will come, and it might be painful. So whatever it is, this is one of the things to do. Now here, you want to plug the creation of black money. We need major economic reforms for it, because there are so many instruments which are facilitators of black money laundering in our country. I think, for example, the one that Tarapura Committee had said very clearly should be abolished was participatory notes. If you see the last 4 or 5 months, there's a huge peaking up of the money flowing in from participatory notes. Participatory notes simplified is simply this. that you get a piece of paper from Morgan Stanley or US Fidelity in investments, and these organizations like that, and that piece of paper will not have your name or date or anything or even a serial number, but it will have the amount, and it is given to you on the basis of cash, no questions asked. The only thing that you have to do is show your Indian passport. And that is because the only country in the world which has participatory notes is India. At least in this we have been inventive and unique. And at least on one thing our passport has great value. And that is that you get this participatory note. Now this participatory note can be brought into India. And it is almost de facto like currency. You just have to make a photostat copy and give a copy to the Reserve Bank, which will give you a chit. And with that you can go to the stock market and hand the participatory note. And SEBI cannot ask you questions where you got the money from. They can ask me or you, who are middle class people or upper middle class people who are investing in the stock market, where did you get the money? But if it's participatory note, no questions asked. The law has been amended. And you invest it in, say, the stock market goes up, and then you sell, and the money you get, you can take it back to you'll get it in rupees, you can take it to the Reserve Bank, and the Reserve Bank then will give you dollars as required under the statutes. So take the dollar back and put it in your account again. This is something which is extraordinary and should have been abolished. And I've tried very hard to get it abolished. But the usual argument given to me is the stock market will collapse if we do this, etc. The time is not ripe, blah, blah, etc. But the fact of the matter is, one of the biggest generators of black money is this. And one interesting aspect of this is that if with participatory notes, a Mauritian company invests in India, then it doesn't even have to pay capital gains tax. If you come directly with participatory notes, you'll have to pay 30% capital gains tax. But if you come with a $1 company from Mauritius, you can set up $1 companies in Mauritius and come into India, then all the capital gains is exempt from tax, because Mauritius is a poor country and we have to look after them. So therefore, they don't look at which nationality has created that. Today, Mauritius is the biggest provider of foreign investment in India, not the United States. And the same thing is true of Singapore. It is number 2 today. Please see the Reserve Bank bulletin and see the listing of how much foreign investment has come from abroad in the last 3 years, and you will find number 1 Mauritius, number 2 Singapore. Both these are small countries. How can they be providing more foreign investment than the United States of America? So this is another way where this black money gets laundered. And therefore, abolishing participatory notes is a very important part. Second thing is, you must create certain incentives in the people to be honest. I have been saying from day one, it's not been yet accepted, I hope to keep pressing, that personal income tax should be abolished. Because what you are getting is just 2 lakh crores. Just 2 lakh crores is all that you're getting. And when people said, where will the revenue come from if you abolish it? I said, auction 2G spectrum. And now you've got it. The only person who is not able to understand is Kapil Sibal, because he said it will be only 0, but then I found out that he can't count beyond 0. So, therefore, in 1 year we have already, now coal, when we finally finish coal auction, you'll get 11 lakh crores. And therefore, most of our natural resources today are just given away. Take, for instance, why people ask me, why are you getting into this airline thing? This Jet Etihad, the entire sky is going to be given to Etihad. And free, for just giving $500 million to Jet Air. And they will be flying so many flights out of India that Indian airports will become just feeder airports, and everybody will not, instead of going straight to America or to Europe, will now go to Abu Dhabi and change planes there and go ahead. So I mean, all our natural resources fetch a huge premium if you sell it in the market. And consequently, there is no shortage of resources. And I think most of the income tax needs to be looked at with full scrutiny. Because even if you abolish income tax, 2 lakh crores, you will get it. And I will probably think that if you abolish income tax, the people will save the money, because Indians are great savers. Our rate of domestic savings is one of the highest in the world as a percentage of GDP. And that will convert into investment. Investment will mean growth. Growth means through indirect taxes, you will get a lot of resources. Even indirect taxes like excise tax, there are some 2,761 commodities or something which are subject to excise tax. You rank them by the revenue they provide. First 22 give you 90% of the revenue. So why are you putting it on the others? Abolish the others and say you must transfer the benefits to the consumer by lowering your prices. This is another major transformation needs to be done. Same thing in real estate. All these registration, etc., needs to be simplified. Indian economy can definitely grow within domestic sources if you bring about new reforms. And today, I want to tell you that when I first proposed this economic reforms, said deregulation enough. So far we have had only deregulation economic reforms. We haven't had serious economic reforms. Economics is a very complicated subject. People think that common sense, economics is common sense. It's not. For instance, the theory of comparative advantage is not a common sense. You can have one country which produces two commodities which are more there's a higher cost. It's more expensive to produce, both more expensive to produce than another country's. And yet if the relative costs are in favor of one country for one commodity, then trade can take place. And trade does take place. Same thing with the common view that if demand rises, then prices will also rise. It can happen the opposite. If production falls, prices will rise. We found in Irish famine that the potato prices started rising, and the demand for potatoes also started rising. And people began to wonder, how is this possible? And they came to the conclusion that potato was so staple at the part of the diet that when its prices rose, people cut consumptions in other things and transferred that money to buy potatoes. And so economics is a very complicated subject. And I think we have to look at it in a systemic way. We were told that we cannot grow more than 3.5% per year. That's the Hindu rate of growth. Who said it's a Hindu rate of growth? Not communalists like myself, but communists. They called it Hindu rate of growth. It is actually a communist rate of growth. It was the rate of growth which the Soviet Union was growing. And we know now the truth about Soviet Union. There's no Soviet Union today. It's in 16 countries. Where has the Soviet model ever worked? Has it worked between Germany, East Germany and West Germany? Today they have become one. Go and see what East Germany, how it compares with West Germany. East Germany followed the Soviet model, and West Germany followed the market model, and West Germany is a developed country, or North Korea and South Korea. Or even China after economic reforms and before economic reforms. Market economy can produce that. The only problem with Narasimha Rao was that he went for market reforms, but he banked on the people being patient to wait for the filter down effect of those reforms. And unfortunately, when you knock off regulations, the beneficiary immediately is the industrialists. And the sufferers are also immediately the touts who used to previously get you quotas, licenses, and so on. So most of them had to be in part of the ruling party to be able to get these quotas and licenses. So therefore, they ganged up against Narasimha Rao, discredited him, and he lost the election. A man who brought your growth rate from below 3% all the way to 8% lost the election because the impression was widely created that they are Narasimha Rao was pro-capitalist. So I think we have to therefore design it in such a way. But you cannot in this country contain black money unless you create incentive for it, for which you require major economic reforms. Certain reforms, I've already told you, like income tax abolition, excise tax streamlining, e-governance is another. But I would say one of the important tools is when you start catching big people, then the impression grows amongst the weaker and smaller people that if they can be caught, I can be caught too. And that is the way to persuade people. Mathematically, this can be demonstrated by using the statistical calculation of expected values, where if it turns out that you may have a small probability of being caught, but once caught you are finished, then it has a huge effect, deterrent effect on the population. And the population individually becomes honest. You don't have to have income tax people running around and catching people by the throat. You don't have to do any of that. I give you the example of the United States. They have done this over and over again, and they do it swiftly. 7th January 2008, there took place 2 press conferences on the same day, one in New York and the other in Hyderabad. Hyderabad's arrest was addressed by Mr. Satyam Raju, and he said that he had defalcated 7,500 crores and is willing to face any punishment. On the same time, by local standard time, Bernard Madoff in New York announced that he had swallowed pension funds, and therefore he is confessing and is ready to face any punishment. Bernard Madoff was put in jail, deprived of all his properties within 6 months, and sentenced to 150 years. They filed so many charges against him, and all were to run not concurrently but sequentially. 6 months, 150 years, he is still in jail. Satyam Raju, I think after God knows how many years now, maybe 8 years, he's got it, but he's gone in appeal. We don't know what's going to happen. But the fact of the matter is that this deterrent effect we have to create. When people ask me, why do you go after all these big people? Is it political rivalry? No. I say, catch the big people, a few of them, and a salutary effect will come where everybody will want to be honest. That is the most important thing. I also say that the corrupt nations are those where money is the determinant of social status. We find that that in our country, as we become more and more materialistic, we are becoming a single-dimensional materialistic society. And that single-dimensional materialistic society, money becomes everything. Money means, if money is everything, that is greed. Once greed takes root, then corruption is inevitable. Then everybody becomes greedy, then they are also amenable. You can bribe officers, you make bribe ministers, you make them all look the other way, while you continue these activities. Our society historically was based on the principle that the most important status is given to those who make the necessary sacrifice and pursue learning. And that money, wealth was not everything. Americans used to be amazed, not anymore, but used to be amazed when I first went there as a student, how a person like Mahatma Gandhi could become leader of India. My classmates asked him, he's not even properly dressed, how can you follow such a man? And I said, in your country, do you have to be properly dressed to become a leader? They said, yes, you must have shining shoes, you must have a lovely tie and coat and pant and shirt. Now, therefore, I also think that there is a value for inculcating in our country that social status should not depend on how much wealth you have. And that also would be a factor in reducing corruption. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that this bill is not going to bring back black money. This bill will assist you in collecting through penal measures revenue from those who have been found and detected. You cannot expect people to voluntarily disclose, because that the courts will not hold it, in my opinion. And therefore, this bill is not sufficient for elimination of the black money problem. For the black money problem, you have to adopt either singly or serially or together the 4 routes I showed you, I told you about. And that has to be done with such seriousness that the foreign governments are also convinced that you mean business. And only then we can be able to do it. At present, these provisions can be misused, there's no question, because when you give so much power, it is capable of being misused. But in the end, it will only deal with a very small problem of black money. Thank you very much.